In the last week of 1462, Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, is marching his army through Wallachia, what is today southern Romania. He's been on campaign for weeks, pushing deeper into enemy territory, and things have been going well. His army outnumbers his opponent nearly 3-1. Victory feels like a formality. And then he sees the forest. Not a forest of trees, a forest of people. 20,000 of them, men, women, and children, each one skewered on a wooden stake and hoisted into the air. Some already dead, others still moving, still groaning, too exhausted to scream. The bodies had been there long enough for nature to begin reclaiming them. The smell hits you from half a mile away. And somewhere behind all of this, the man who built it is watching. Mehmed II had personally overseen the fall of Constantinople 9 years earlier. He had walked through cities where his own soldiers massacred every living thing inside the walls. He was not a squeamish man. He was not easily rattled. But standing at the edge of that forest, he reportedly said that it was not possible to deprive such a man of his country, and he turned his army around and went home. The man responsible for stopping the most powerful military force in the world with nothing but wooden stakes and sheer psychological horror was Vlad III of Wallachia, known to history as Vlad the Impaler, known to the Ottomans as Kazaklu Bey, the Impaler Lord, and known to you, probably, as the man whose name Bram Stoker borrowed for a vampire novel 400 years later. Today, we're telling the full story, the real man, the real history, and the full, unfiltered truth behind one of the most terrifying figures who ever lived. And I promise you, the reality is darker than anything the legend ever captured. If you're new here, this is DarkPast. We cover the real history they don't teach in school. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. To understand Vlad, you have to understand the world he was born into, because he didn't become what he became in a vacuum. He was shaped by a world that was itself extraordinarily brutal, and he absorbed every lesson it had to offer. The year is 1431. Wallachia is a small principality in what is today southern Romania, sandwiched between two superpowers, the Kingdom of Hungary to the north and west, and the rapidly expanding Ottoman Empire to the south and east. It functioned essentially as a buffer state, a prize to be fought over, a chess piece moved around by bigger hands. Whoever sat on the Wallachian throne did so at the pleasure of either Budapest or Constantinople, and when one patron decided they wanted a different man in charge, the previous ruler was simply removed, assassinated, blinded, buried alive. Wallachia burned through rulers at a staggering rate. Some reigned for months, few lasted more than a few years. His father, Vlad II, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order founded to defend Christian Europe against Ottoman expansion. This is where the family name Dracul comes from, meaning dragon in Romanian. Vlad III, being the son of Dracul, became Dracula, not a supernatural monster, just a surname, son of the dragon. But Vlad's father was pragmatic to a fault. To keep his throne, he pursued uneasy cooperation with the Ottomans. He paid tribute, he sent soldiers to fight in Ottoman campaigns, and then he did something that would define his son's entire life. As a guarantee of loyalty, Vlad II sent his two sons to the Ottoman court as hostages. Vlad III was around 11 or 12. His younger brother Radu was perhaps 6 or 7. They were taken deep into Ottoman territory and held there for years. Think about what that means. A child taken from his home, surrounded by the enemies of his people, knowing his life depended entirely on his father's obedience. During those years, Vlad received a thorough education in Ottoman culture, military tactics, and most importantly, how the Ottomans used fear to control vast populations. He was going to school for what he would later become.
Then, in 1447, word arrived. His father had been assassinated by Wallachian boyars, almost certainly with the backing of Hungarian regent John Hunyadi. His older brother had been blinded with hot irons and buried alive. Vlad was 15 years old. His father was dead. His brother was dead. His country had been taken by enemies, and he was still a prisoner. He would not forget any of this. History didn't create monsters. It creates pressure, and pressure creates choices. If you're here for real history, stay. Vlad returned to Wallachia in 1448, when the Ottomans briefly installed him as a puppet ruler. He was 17. He lasted 2 months before being driven out and fleeing into exile. For the next several years, he was a man without a country, moving between courts, waiting. He even reconciled with John Hunyadi, the man who had likely arranged his father's murder because survival demanded it. Then the opportunity came. Hunyadi died of plague, the political situation shifted, and Vlad, now 24, seized the throne. From the very beginning, he made one thing clear. He was not going to be a puppet. The only way to hold power in Wallachia was to make the cost of opposing you so unbearably high that no one would dare try. And so the impalements began. His first targets were the boyars, the Wallachian nobility, who had facilitated the constant regime changes, switched sides whenever convenient, and stood by while his father and brother were killed. Vlad had not forgotten, and he had a plan. In the spring of 1457, he invited the boyars to an Easter feast. Feasts were normal political life. Refusing to attend would be more dangerous than showing up. So they came. The entire Wallachian aristocracy gathered in one place. For the first few hours, things were relaxed. Food, drink, conversation. Perhaps some of them thought the stories about Vlad had been exaggerated. Then he asked a question. How many rulers of Wallachia have you seen come and go in your lifetime? The boyars answered honestly. The younger ones said 2 or 3. The older ones said more. The oldest guest said he had witnessed 15 separate rulers on the throne in his lifetime. The room went quiet. Vlad's expression changed. He told them flatly that in that case he couldn't trust any of them because none of them had ever been truly loyal to anyone. The boyars were immediately arrested. Those too old or weak to be useful were impaled that very day. The rest were marched into years of forced labor, building Vlad's fortresses with their bare hands. In a single afternoon, he had decapitated the Wallachian aristocracy and replaced them with commoners who owed everything to him. The impalements didn't stop there. Theft, corruption, dishonesty, all punishable by impalement. He impaled merchants who cheated customers, officials who took bribes. An Ottoman ambassador who failed to remove his turban in Vlad's presence reportedly had the turban nailed directly to his head. He had a system, a horrifying, methodical system, but a system nonetheless. If you want more deep dives like this, subscribe to DarkPast. New videos every week, always free.
Now we need to talk about what Vlad was actually doing to people. Because impalement is ancient, and Vlad didn't invent it. What he did was perfect it. Impalement appears in Babylonian law as far back as 1700 BC. Early impalement was transversal, a stake driven horizontally through the chest. Brutal, but death came quickly as major organs were destroyed. The Assyrian king Ashur-nasir-pal II in the 9th century BC refined it further. Vertical impalement, stakes driven upward from below, bodies hoisted into public view as a warning. Still agonizing, still relatively fast, death within the hour in most cases. For centuries, that was impalement, terrible, but mercifully brief. Then came Vlad. He replaced the sharpened stake with a blunted one, heavily lubricated with animal fat.
The executioner's job was no longer to kill quickly. It was to thread the stake through the body without hitting anything vital, following the spine, avoiding organs, keeping the victim alive. Once through, the stake was raised upright and the victim hoisted into the air. No fatal wound, no immediate blood loss, just a body suspended on wood, alive, unable to move, exposed to open sky. Death could take hours, sometimes days. Many victims didn't die from the impalement itself. They died from exposure, dehydration, cold. Their bodies simply ran out of the will to continue. A French merchant named Jean Thévenot, traveling through Egypt in the 17th century, watched an impalement and wrote it down. He describes a man suspended on a stake for hours, still conscious, still speaking, turning his head to beg passers-by to end it, his face collapsing in agony every time he shifted his weight. He was eventually killed simply by driving the stake the rest of the way through. That man was still talking after hours on the stake. Now, multiply that by 20,000. Most people think they know this story. They don't. That's why you're still watching. June 1462. Mehmed II had had enough. Vlad had been refusing to pay Ottoman tribute, raiding across the Danube, and had, by some accounts, killed between 20 and 30,000 Ottoman soldiers and civilians in a single winter campaign, then sent Mehmed a letter describing it in clinical detail, listing the dead almost like a business report. Mehmed II assembled between 60,000 and 90,000 men and marched into Wallachia. Vlad had perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers and knew he couldn't meet that force in open battle, so he didn't try. He poisoned wells, he drove livestock away, he sent soldiers infected with plague into Ottoman camps. He launched a night raid aimed directly at killing Mehmed himself, coming within yards of the Sultan's tent before being driven off. And then, as the Ottomans pushed toward the capital, Vlad prepared his final move. Picture this from ground level. You're a soldier in that army, marching for weeks, tired, hungry, deep inside hostile territory. You've survived the night raids, the poisoned wells, the disease in the camp. You tell yourself the worst is behind you, the capital is close, this campaign is almost over. And then the road opens up in front of you. Stakes as far as you can see, 20,000 people raised into the air, the scene utterly silent except for the wind and the sounds of those still alive among the dead, groaning, shifting, waiting. The capital behind it all sits empty. Vlad is gone, but his message is everywhere. Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople, destroyer of empires, stood at the edge of that forest and said it was not possible to deprive a man like that of his country. He turned around and went home. He left his vassal Radu, Vlad's own brother, to deal with the problem. The surviving boyars immediately defected to Radu, because whatever you could say about an Ottoman puppet, at least he wasn't impaling everyone. Vlad fled to Hungary in 1462 and was placed under arrest by King Matthias Corvinus, spending roughly 12 years in captivity. Even during his imprisonment, stories about him were spreading through the newly invented printing press. German pamphlets described his atrocities in vivid detail. He became one of the first figures in history turned into a media sensation, a monster for the reading public to be horrified from the comfort of their homes. We're almost at the end. If you've watched this far, hit subscribe. You already know this channel is for you. Vlad was reinstalled as ruler of Wallachia in 1476, backed by the Hungarian crown. His third reign lasted 2 months. In late 1476, he was killed in battle against the Ottomans near Bucharest. His head was cut off, preserved in honey, sent to Mehmed II in Constantinople as proof that the Impaler Lord was truly dead. Mehmed had it displayed on a spike at the city gates. Fitting. His body was buried somewhere. The location has never been confirmed. The man who defined himself entirely through what he did to other people's bodies essentially vanished after death. 400 years later, Bram Stoker borrowed his name for a vampire novel. The historical Vlad was not from Transylvania. He was not supernatural. He was something more unsettling, a real human being who made deliberate choices to inflict suffering on a massive scale, and whose name outlived his entire world by centuries. Today, in Romania, he is not simply a monster. He is frequently held up as a national defender, a ruler who, however brutal, kept Wallachia independent during one of the most dangerous periods in European history. The complexity disappears when history becomes legend, but it was always there. What Vlad understood and what made him so dangerous is something that didn't die with him. When violence becomes theater, it's no longer just punishment, it's messaging. Every stake Vlad raised was a sentence written in a language that needed no translation. This is what opposition costs. I am willing to go further than you are. The rules that apply to other men do not apply to me. That logic didn't begin with Vlad, and it didn't end with him either. Different centuries, different methods, same message. Fear can win a war. It cannot build a future. Vlad died alone, betrayed, without a country, without allies, with nothing left but the stories people told about him in horrified whispers. He spent his entire life trying to make himself untouchable through terror, and in the end, his own people chose a foreign puppet over him. He wanted to be feared. He got exactly that, and history never forgave him. I'll see you in the dark.